This is part of the way the unconscious works. One of the difficulties that I think some of you are having is that you haven't taken and built into the state of consciousness you use on a stage something which slows time down. Because if you feel rushed, you're going to get nervous. This is what happens when people say, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, especially if you're the one saying it. You have a voice inside your head going, well, I have to think about this and do this and blah, 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 and watch everything and think about this. And what loop am I in? Was it the third one or the second one? I don't know where I am. If you have stuff like that going on in your head, it's always going to be more difficult than if you can use states of time distortion. Most of you have been driving in a car and something happened, and to avoid an accident, you literally slowed time down so that what could have happened in normal time, suddenly you sped time up, so you had all the time you needed to avoid hitting that tree. If you hit the tree, probably you didn't go into that state. The same thing is true when you're on a stage. One of the ways to avoid making mistakes is to be able to control your consciousness. Remember, the world doesn't slow down, you speed up. The thing that makes it seem like things are taking forever. All of you have had dreams, and those dreams go on over a period of days or a period of hours, and you dream it in a matter of seconds. We're capable of speeding up our internal state. Now, I know many people forget that every activity should have its own distinct state of consciousness. What you do before you jump off a diving board should be different than when you're buying a can of soup. I mean, I know it sounds simple, but yet there are lots of people who they don't make the distinction. They let the states of consciousness they have get wishy-washy and melt together so that they're just kind of in a blur. And this is one of the things that makes it so that time isn't discrete. I noticed when I was watching you yesterday that many of you have really gotten into using tempo and rhythm. The first day it was so painful for me, I can't even begin to tell you. Isn't it glad that day is over? Because tomorrow you're going to discover that if while you sleep and dream tonight, your unconscious takes flight into the past and runs always forward so that you only notice what you're doing that's better. Don't look and you go, well, this is still fucked up. You don't want to give yourself those suggestions. Instead, you want to focus then so you can go, if I can get this to be better, if I can get this to be better, if I can be this much more comfortable, then imagine how quickly, because maybe in 2 months I would be here, so why wait? Pull it forward. Your ability to grab the future and pull it into the present. Remember, the past is just the future moving past now into the past. So there's no need to wait. You can literally imagine that if a year from now, and if you practiced every day and you really struggled with it, you can see how you would be and then pull it into the present. While you sleep and dream, you could run 100,000 scenarios and try it so you built the voice motor programs, so that you built in the implicit muscle movements, so that you tried various other rhythms till you found that it's not just doing one rhythm over and over again, but your ability to change from one to another, just like using different voice tones. Everybody here should know a Texas accent is a deeper and deeper state. Now, what's your name, dear?
Patricia.
Come here, dear. It's all right. Come on out here. See this chair right here? This one here is mine. Okay. You just sit for a spell, okay? Okay. Now, because one of the things that they kept telling me was that here they had people locked away in hospitals and they didn't know what to do with them. And yet they said, unless you had the same skills they had, you couldn't talk to them. Since their skills didn't work, it seemed to me that we needed new sets of skills. So I made up the term neurolinguistic programming so that, because I knew they would have no idea. In those days, computers were in 4-story buildings. Floppy disks were this big. They were called RKO5s. Tape drives, the tape was this thick on them. They had flashing lights. They were more satisfying than a laptop that looks at you and goes, syntax error, Hard disk crash, that's my favorite one, because when it says that, I take it as a command. I'm just like that. Okay, dear. Now, somebody asked me yesterday, and they sent me a little note, and it said, we saw you do a nonverbal induction. And all you did was look at this person. And they went into a trance, and they said, can you teach me to do that? Who wrote me that note?
I wrote it before you told us to do it, before you taught us how to do it.
You wrote it before I told you how to do it?
I wrote it the day before, and but I didn't put it in the box until 2 days later. It was in my bag.
Yeah. Okay. So you know how to do it perfectly now.
Sort of.
Sort of? What's your name, dear?
Tanya.
Tanya? Would you come down here, Tanya? Thank you. Because I'm going to show you how you do this, and I'm going to try to break it in. See, because remember, one kind of hypnotic induction that's very rapid, of course, is to interrupt a pattern, like a handshake. Okay, and when you interrupt a handshake, or in this case, you know, I just interrupted it, it took his hand, left it cataleptically, and so he could go into a really, really deep trance. Now, on the other hand, the other kind of hypnotic induction has to do with focusing somebody's attention. Now, you can have them stare at a candle, but I don't have one, so we'll have to hallucinate that. And rather than hallucinate that, all I'm going to ask you to do is just to look at me, because I'm going to show you where deep trance is. Because I've discovered over the years that people learn very fast non-verbally. You ready? Here we go. That's right. Take a deep breath in through your mouth. That's right. Now close your eyes. That's right. And just drop down and start to relax. Take a deep breath in through your mouth. Don't worry about your face. It'll be there when you come back. I know you were a little nervous, but that will fade. Just let it relax. Start with your forehead. And we'll just touch your third eye. And just drift down and really relax and soften your cheek muscles. Take a deep breath in through your mouth, let it out through your nose, and just drop down. Relax. Everything's going to be okay. That's right. And while you drop down, because in a minute, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. What was your name again?
Tanya.
Hi, Tanya. Sleep. That's right. Now, you're next. That's right. Because hypnotic inductions are not that difficult if you watch for the right moment. If you watch people, they're drifting in and out all the time. You just have to catch the right moment and to mark it off so that people can go into a state where they can begin to learn to just relax. That's right, and go deeper and deeper still. Because the process of learning, whether or not you have somebody fix on something or whether you interrupt a pattern, it really doesn't matter that much. It's just a chance to teach people how to go into an altered state where they get good.
In this remarkable demonstration, Dr. Richard Bandler challenges conventional ideas about talent with extraordinary hypnotic installations. As you watch this, you may well find your creative abilities improve.
Today, I want to do something a little bit different. In neurolinguistic programming, the foundation of the entire field is based on a simple notion. A long time ago, when I was doing hypnosis, suddenly dawned on me that if you could hypnotize people and get them to do things that they couldn't do normally, what was going on? And I started thinking about it in a much broader sense because there were many people who were very talented at certain things. And NLP gives you the ability to ask very precise questions about consciousness. And it started out with spelling. There were kids that could spell and kids that couldn't spell. I happened to be one of the ones that had no idea how to spell most words because they told me that you should spell them phonetically. And you can't even spell phonetics phonetically. It actually comes out phonics. And this morning on television, there was one of the politicians here locally announcing about how they had to go back to using phonetics as the foundation of learning to read. And unfortunately, in English, most words aren't really that phonetic. Words like caught are really that we have silent letters and long vowels and all kinds of strange things that sound more like a hypnotic induction than anything else. Now, it went further than that. I think a lot of my teachers were actually very vicious hypnotists. that they did things to me. For example, when I was in the 4th grade, they came and they handed me a little plastic flute about this big and a piece of sheet music. And on the sheet music was a wonderful song called Yankee Doodle Dandy, not one of my favorites. And they said, this is Every Good Boy Does Fine, and the spaces were face. And I didn't even know what they were talking about. And they said, learn to play this song. And I went home and I blew in the thing and it sounded horrible, so I didn't do it. And then the day before we were supposed to be tested on it, I tried to remember the song. I went, let's see, it's Yankee Doodle something or other. And I went, and I took it and I went into the class and all these kids went, and I went, and they looked at me and they said, you're not musical, took my flute away, said I couldn't be in the band, and said you'd never learn to play music. Now, since then, I've written the equivalent of over 35 symphonies. And the music's on the personal enhancement series and all of those hypnosis tapes and all kinds of other things. I've written the music for television commercials when I worked for ad agencies. I scored a whole symphony with orchestra. So they weren't exactly right, but then I'm very stubborn. They also did something else to me. They put me in an art class. I got in trouble in one class, so they pulled me out of the class and they said the only thing I could do was art. So they stuck me in the art class because I had gotten in a fight with the teacher. I was a bad boy. And the art teacher stuck a fruit bowl on a table. And she said to me, she said, everyone is going to draw the fruit bowl. And they handed us these, I don't know if they were colored crayons or something. And I drew something that looked like somebody sneezed color onto the paper. The guy next to me drew something that looked like a photograph. And I kept looking at it going, Jiminy Crickets, how's he doing this? You know, and he was like, shading everything. And the teacher came up and took it and she shook her head and looked at me disgustingly and she said, ooh, you're not artistic. And I went, not artistic. When I was 29 years old, roughly, walking down the street of New York, I was staying at the Barbizon Plaza, and my wife and I were walking down the street, and we walked in front of an art store, and my wife said to me, she said, ooh, let's get some stuff and paint. And I looked at her and went, I am not artistic. And she went, that's crazy. You do everything. Why wouldn't you be artistic? I went, not artistic. I can't. I'm not artistic. Suddenly I went, this sounds more like a post-hypnotic suggestion than reality. So she bought a bunch of art supplies, took me up in the room, and she took pastels, and she said, just draw. And I looked at the paper and went, looked at her and went, she said, draw. And I went, and she took and ripped the stuff off the side and just took it, went like that, and then she pulled out the scan of stuff and went, and I went, suddenly I felt like drawing. Now, as it turns out, then I came to London, and I was sitting on the Thames, and there was this guy sitting on the Thames, and he was drawing the buildings on the other side and the trees. And, I mean, it was very detailed, and even the lighting was the same, and the shadows and everything, and I was looking at it like this. And I said to him, I said, I don't get it. How do you get the picture that's across the river onto the canvas? And he looked at me, his pupils dilated like every deep trance subject I've ever worked with. And he went, I don't. And I went, well, isn't this you sitting here? And he said, well, it's not like that. He said, what I do is I see a big hand in the sky. And I went, right. I said, are you on something? And he went, no, not right now. And he said, the hand in the sky's got the same color that I have. And he goes, and the way I get the color is I mix together colors, because it's pretty simple. You start with 3 colors. That's right. Close your eyes. Now, sleep. That's right, all the way back here. All the way back. That's right. Let's go. Now, I want all of you to relax. And I want you to just keep drifting back and back and back. That's right. Keep drifting back. That's right. And the deeper you go,
the more that finger will remember. Some of you saw a finger that shook. Some of you saw a finger that was still. And it still doesn't matter which finger it was. It only matters that you feel younger, that you go back to childhood songs, that you go back to the alphabet. That's right. And that you keep drifting back and finding a state of balance. Because back when you were young, you used to see things that you can't see anymore. Because before your mind learned to organize and discover the difference between things, it all was one big something. You didn't know where a drawer was and where the bureau was. It was all one thing till you saw people open the drawer and you began to notice the patterns that emerge through years of experience. Now, through the years of experience that you've lived, you've learned that some things are times to feel bad. Now, some things are worth feeling bad about. Fire is a good one. If you touch fire too long, it'll either burn you or you'll get scared and you'll move before it does. If you see headlights racing towards you down the road, you don't need to take a closer look. You need to stay on the curb. The job of your unconscious is to find a way to protect you. But I think your unconscious has been somewhat sloppy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to build a new childhood feeling. We're going to play the game of pretend. Now, back when you were young, honestly younger now, if you go back to about when you were 5, maybe 4, maybe 6, maybe 3, back to a really pleasant memory. See what you saw when you were there. In fact, feel the way you felt then, and let that feeling spin and spread. Remember, you had a childhood knees. You had a wiggly toes. You had giggles here and there. All the things that kids have. And the more you remember the sound of giggling, the more you remember the games you played, the more you remember those things, the better you start to feel. Because before you learn the years of things that you did learn, which are good things, and I don't want you to do anything that makes you lose anything that's worth keeping. But by the same token, you could be excited by anything. It took good, well-meaning people to teach you your limitations. Now, some of you learned that you were not artistic, and some of you learned you were not musical. Some of you learned you were not smart, and some of you learned you were not beautiful. But before you knew that, you felt all of those things easily. Because it's not that you got smarter, it's that you learned to accept suggestions which were unnecessary. Now, in a moment, Doris, I'm going to touch you on the knee. And when I do, I want your unconscious to start to answer me with those wiggling fingers. I want you to use your left finger. That's right, still now. Still the left finger. Very still. That's right, just stop for a second. I want your left finger to signal me yes when it's a yes. And I want you to use this finger to signal me no. Because I want to ask your unconscious, do you believe that Doris is ready to go into a really deep trance? All right.